Middle East, vehicles carrying the remains of 4 deceased Israeli hostages that have returned from Gaza City. They have arrived at the National Center of Forensic Medicine in Tel Aviv. The return is part of a U.S. brokered deal that saw a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The deal saw the return of 20 surviving hostages held by Hamas so far and the release of more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners by Israel. Israelis have gathered in front of the National Center of Forensic Medicine to pay their respects to the deceased hostages. Let's listen into what they have said.
I'm here with my son because we wanted to pay our last respect for the 4 hostages, the dead hostages that came back. This is a very, very sad day for us. We don't know who they are, but they are a part of us, a part of our people, a brother, a father, someone that we cared about and we wanted to see him.
The Israeli Defense Forces office has said that the identification process for the 4 hostages is still underway. While all living hostages were returned, pressure is growing on Hamas and the Israeli government over the remains of all the deceased hostages, which Hamas has not yet repatriated. Meanwhile, Palestinians are increasingly worried that a delay in Hamas's returning the bodies could bring uncertainty to the future of the ceasefire. Now, for this discussion, we're joined by Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, this is very sensitive, even though the ceasefire has been reached, the phase 1 has been ongoing. What role do the remains of these deceased hostages play in the ongoing ceasefire?
Yeah, you are right. It's a bit unusual. Normally, in armed conflict, the prisoners of war exchanges are very usual, very normal. It happens all the time. But in this case, the tactics of Hamas is to keep some deceased bodies as to gain extra benefits from themselves. Somehow to survive, Hamas would like to have some leverage. And I think one demand they may have is to somehow to guarantee their own survival, their own lives by keeping some deceased body. We will see what they will say. But as I said, it's unusual. Logistically, it doesn't make any sense to keep dead bodies. They need to be kept in freezers for 2 and more years. And a lot of those were actually dead already on 7th of October. These were victims of 7th of October, and simply the bodies were taken into Gaza and being put in freezers for more than 2 years, simply as an additional pressure on Israel to, for example, to release more Palestinian prisoners, or for Hamas itself, somehow for their own survival. That's how I read that. We will see in the next hours and days how many of the deceased body will. The good news is that all the living hostages are back home, and that's a great news. That's something to celebrate. All the families are happy on that front, but those families that lost their boys and girls are still waiting for some of those bodies to be brought home.
And Professor, we also this morning we heard some shots were fired from Israeli sides, and around 6 people in Gaza were killed again. How does this U.S. broker deal between Israel and Hamas, which also includes the return of all the hostages and detainees, reflect the complexities of negotiating peace between Israel and Hamas?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a complex issue. Ceasefire is only preliminary measure, and the return of hostages and Palestinian prisoners back to Gaza and West Bank are also somehow first steps. These are only first steps. There will be a long process of negotiations here. There is no peace yet. There is only a ceasefire. And for the peace to materialize, there are a lot of factors. For example, the two-state solutions. Will Israel agree on a Palestinian state? We don't see any signals yet for that to happen. Will Arab countries, all of them, including Palestinians, agree on Israeli state? Again, we don't see much of that happening. What will happen with the settlements? A big issue. That there are a lot of Israeli settlers in West Bank and possibly in Gaza too. Will Israel be leaving all the 100% of the territory of Gaza? Another question. So there will be a lot of question marks in the next weeks and months. So the peace might not be ever near. Some skeptics even predict a renewal of violence, and you mentioned some shots. It could be a renewed violence. We don't know yet. So the peace is not easy. Well, we can celebrate the hostages return, and families are happy, and let's give them those, 24, 48 hours to celebrate that. But then the next day, from tomorrow, we need really to sit and reasonably think what peace can be achieved, and the skeptical voices will go every day, and many people will say, this is okay, first step, but if nothing follows after that, the conflict will remain as it was before 7th of October and over the last decades. It's a long conflict that takes already 7 decades.
Yes, Professor Veselin Popowski, thank you for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you. And now we move on. The U.S. President Donald Trump has criticized Russian President Vladimir Putin by saying that Russian leaders is simply unwilling to end the war with Ukraine. President Trump has said that he had a very good relationship with Putin earlier, but Putin just did not want to end that war, and it was thought to be making them look very bad. He could end it. Although, let's listen into what Trump has said.
Look, I'm very disappointed because Vladimir and I had a very good relationship, probably still do. I don't know why he continues with this war. This war has been so bad for him. He's going into 4 years of a war that he should have won that war in 1 week. He's now going to soon be into his 4th year. He's lost 1.5 million soldiers, probably, close. Certainly in terms of wounded and no legs and no arms and all the things that happen in horrible wars. It's a horrible war. He's got to really settle this war. And they have long lines waiting for gasoline in Russia right now, right? They have long lines. Who thought that was going to happen? And all of a sudden his economy is going to collapse. And I'd like to see him do well. I mean, I had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin, but he just doesn't want to end that war. And I think it's making him look very bad. He could end it. He could end it quickly. And I have to tell you, I give credit because who would think that Ukraine could have fought Russia for 4 years to essentially a standstill? Now, there has been some early, before they knew what the hell was happening, because it happened quick. Biden should have never let that happen. That's a war that should have never happened, but it did. But it's not making Russia look good, I will tell you that.
Really? Tomahawks like Ukraine?
We'll be talking about Ukraine, yeah. I mean, I have the president coming in on Friday, and I know what he has to say. He wants weapons. He would like to have tomahawks. Everyone else wants tomahawks. And we have a lot of tomahawks. Tomahawk is
Earlier, the Russian President Vladimir Putin had cautioned that supplying of long-range weapons to Ukraine would cross a red line and further escalate hostilities. The concern follows a Russian airstrike on Ukraine's power grids as part of a campaign to cripple its energy infrastructure ahead of winter. Now we go back to Professor Veselin Popowski. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, what's the situation with U.S., Russia, as well as Ukraine now?
I'm very happy to hear that finally Donald Trump realized what he should have realized 10 months ago, that there is no way to talk to Putin and achieve anything. Putin wants to continue the war. He has no other escape. he will be dead the day when the war is ended, because he has no other option. Those soldiers in Russia going back home, they will create such a huge mutinies and disasters that he doesn't want to end the war. He cannot say anything to the soldiers, to the officers, to the KGB, to anybody in Russia. So the war is the only survival tool for Putin, and for that matter, Donald Trump finally realizes that. And he talks the right language. He should give support to Ukraine. Let's see on Friday, Zelensky will be in the White House. And he mentioned Tomahawks, and that's a great news, because if the United States releases Tomahawks to NATO and NATO provide those to Ukraine, these are already long-range missiles. They go 2,500 kilometers. And that's what Ukraine needs. Ukraine needs to go long range and to destroy any Russian military objects all over Russia. And that's why the war will end with Tomahawks being supplied to Ukraine and the ability of Ukraine to strike deeply into Russian territory. Of course, Kremlin is talking about future red lines and all that. That's absolute nonsense. Moscow is talking that every time when there is another development, and there is no way to be any more scared of those talks from Moscow. Moscow has nothing else to do apart from talks. They cannot do anything anymore. They should simply surrender and go back home and liberate the territories they illegally occupy for almost 4 years. And yes, Donald Trump also mentioned more than 1 million, 1.5 million Russian soldiers dead, which is a huge toll of human lives. And all these questions will strike back on Putin. That's why Putin doesn't want to end the war, because a lot of questions will be asked by the Russian society, including about why he went there 4 years ago. What did he achieve? Zero. And why he expend 1.5 million soldiers. Interestingly, the Russians suffer much more from Putin than anywhere else. Ukrainians lost life in 6 digits, but what Russians lost was 7 digits of human life during this war. And all this question will go back to Putin, who has no options to escape. He will end the way Hitler and Mussolini or Gaddafi. He has options to choose how to end his life: by suicide, assassinated, in prison, and that's all what Putin is left with.
And Professor, we see that, with President Trump's comments as well, but we see there's broader international divide on this approach to the Russia-Ukraine war. So what role does diplomacy play in potentially ending this war? Is there a chance for diplomacy here?
No, we have actually unification. With Donald Trump joining the reasonable voices around the world, saying to him who is right, who is wrong, there is no more divide here. We don't see much divide. Well, there are some countries who still buy Russian oil and gas, and that's a problem. They should stop doing that, because that fuels, that gives Putin some extra oxygen, some extra money to buy weapons and soldiers, but it should also end. So if all countries in the world end buying oil and gas from Russia, the war will be over. So the only, there are two things that still keep Putin alive. One is kind of the Donald Trump misunderstanding of Russia and trying to please Putin and trying to engage in diplomacy for 10 months that prolonged the war. Actually, Donald Trump did prolong the war in Ukraine. If it was Kamala Harris, the war will be ended by now. And the second reason the war is still there are countries, unfortunately including India, that buy large quantities of oil and gas from Russia, effectively fueling the war, effectively giving Putin more money to buy soldiers and weapons. So hopefully over time, over the next weeks and months, we will see those two sanctions on Russia, more military support to Ukraine, and the diplomacy will be very quick after that. Once Russia is collapsing, as Donald Trump just said, then the peace will come immediately with a new Russian president. He will sign the peace treaty immediately. And he will blame Putin on it. Every time there is a change in Russian history, the next leader will blame the previous leader on everything. So some people say there will be a worse president after Putin. They cannot be. The next president of Russia will blame Putin for all these lives lost, for all these economic collapses. And that happened when Khrushchev replaced Stalin, when Brezhnev replaced Khrushchev, when Gorbachev replaced Brezhnev,
Yes.
when Putin replaced Yeltsin. There is always a blame on the previous leader. And that will be the end of Putin, and the next president will sign the peace immediately.
Thank you very much, Professor Veselin Poboski, for always joining us and sharing that insight. Now we move on to U.S. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a stark warning that his support for Argentina's struggling economy would end if President Javier Milei loses his upcoming legislative elections. His warnings come as Washington hosts the Argentinian president, President Trump, during a press briefing with Milei, has stated the following.
So it's a little bit like that with, if you take a look at Argentina, if the president doesn't win, I know the person that he'd be running against, I believe, probably, we probably have the person. A person is extremely far left and a philosophy that got Argentina into this problem in the first place. So we would not be generous with Argentina if that happened. If he loses, we are not going to be generous with Argentina.
President Trump, who has pledged $20 billion to aid Argentina, stated that if Milei's minority party fails to gain seats, U.S. backing could be withdrawn. Despite the financial aid, Argentina's markets remain unsettled and Milei's approval ratings are low ahead of the October 2026 midterms. Trump, who hails Milei as a great leader, emphasized the ideological alignment between the two, calling it a Make Argentina Great Again effort. As Argentina grapples with a severe liquidity crisis, U.S. Treasury officials have stepped in to offer financial relief, stabilizing the peso and endorsing Milei as he faces the midterms. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, what are the potential consequences for Argentina's economy if U.S. financial support is withdrawn?
Of course, this is serious. Argentina's financial situation is not good for a long time indeed. So that's why they need U.S. support. And in this case, President Trump focusing on the right-wing cooperation. So that's why if the Argentina government is right-wing, of course, this is a good message to the President Trump, because recently the United States limits the support to the other country. Despite this, Argentina got the support, the rescue plan from the United States, means that President Milei quite succeeded to get the support from President Trump. But the image could easy to destroy because of the election. So that's why the current situation is good for Argentina, and so if the situation will change, it is not good for Argentina. And in case of the President Trump, indeed, Argentina is located in the American continent is also matter because current President Trump focusing on issue in the American continent as a priority area. So that's why if the Argentina change government stance, and this is not right-wing government President Trump like, of course, it will affect very severely, I think. So that's why the President Milei of Argentina was quite succeeded to get the mind of the President Trump. That is a very good situation for the Argentina just now. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And Dr. Satoru, how does President Trump's warning to Argentina highlight the intersection of international aid, political support, and ideological alignment between these two?
Yes, of course, in case of the relation between President Trump and President Milei, both right and do not like the role of the international organizations because they believe that these organizations are liberal side. So, but of course, if the government had changed Argentina and of course, different sides, more the middle left or left side government established. In this case, of course, they will lose the support from President Trump. So instead of this, they try to seek the support from the international organization or China. These are the other choices for them. But currently, President Trump focusing on the American continent is indeed a very big impact in this region, I believe. So that's why in the election in Argentina was President Milei's success is indeed a relatively good impact for the Argentina just now. So there is no reason to change it. But view from the diplomacy or view from the Argentina-U.S. relation, this is a relatively good situation, I think.
Thank you, Professor, for joining us, Doctor, for joining us and sharing that insight. Now we stay on this topic as the liquidity crisis deepens. Argentine President Javier Milei accused his political opponents of exacerbating the country's financial troubles. Speaking in Washington, he told U.S. President Donald Trump that the ongoing liquidity crisis was a result of political attacks against his government. Argentina has been struggling with a severe economic crisis, spending over $1 billion to defend the peso in recent weeks. Let's now listen in to what some locals have said in the economic condition of this nation.
La ayuda que está pidiendo, ya sabemos para qué. Esta ayuda que él está pidiendo a Donald Trump, ya sabemos para qué. Esto es para él, para los ricos, no es para la gente de perfil bajo o medio, clase media. Esto es todo para ellos. Esto es una cadena.
El país está difícil, la economía está dura porque los sueldos están bajos y el vivir, bueno, hay que hacer magia el día a día para vivir, pero apuntemos a que nuestro presidente saque el país adelante. No lo conocíamos al presidente, así que es una caja de sorpresa.
Es todo muy, muy caro. Más allá que la inflación está relativamente controlada, está excesivamente caro casi todo. La capacidad de compra es muy baja, entonces es un gran dilema. Hay un gran parate general. Sumado a eso el comportamiento cruel, despreciando a la gente de alguna forma del Poder Ejecutivo del Gobierno, eso hace que la situación esté difícil.
Now we move on. U.S. President Donald Trump has criticized Spain for refusing to meet the proposed 5% defense spending target for NATO members, calling the move very disrespectful to the alliance. Speaking in Washington, President Trump has stated that Spain is the only NATO country to reject the proposal and warned that it could face trade punishment through tariffs as a consequence. Earlier this week, the U.S. president even suggested that Spain could be expelled from NATO. The comments come amid growing tension between Washington and several European allies over Trump's demand that members boost defense budgets far beyond NATO's long-standing 2% goal. Let's listen into what President Trump has said.
I think it's very disrespectful to NATO. In fact, I was thinking about giving them trade punishment through tariffs because of what they did. And I may do that. I think unbelievably disrespectful. Spain, the only one out of all the countries in NATO, the only one that said that is Spain. And I think that's, I think they should be punished for that. Yes, I do.
Now for this discussion, we go back to Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you, Doctor, for staying with us. Now, what impact could President Trump's threat have on U.S.-Spain relations, and how might it affect Spain's position within the NATO?
Currently, the U.S.-Spain relation is becoming deteriorating day by day, I think. But because even if we say the one word Europe, the mood is different in each region, especially the border regions with Russia, for example, the North Europe and Eastern Europe. This area, of course, the tension is rising, and there is a mood. They want to raise the defense budget. So in this case, 5% of the GDP that they can easily accept. But the more Western side, in the Western side country in Europe, in this tension is a little bit, mood is a little bit low, and motivation is a little bit low to increase their defense budget, especially the Western side of Spain. There is no mood to raise the defense budget so drastically. So despite this, President Trump's pressure is, of course, the same from the east to west of the Europe as a NATO. So that's why the reaction from the Spain looks like the U.S. try to force Spain to raise their defense budget and try to resist it. So firstly, there's no money, there's no reason to increase. And secondly, instead of buying U.S. weapons, they are searching other weapons, something like that. So view from the United States, this is quite a challenging attitude. So that's why both the U.S. side and the Spain side frustrated very much. So that's why such kind of things happening now. And this is not a good, this is wrong cycle, simply said. So that's why something is needed to improve the relations.
And what do you think, what are the potential consequences for NATO's unity if more member states follow Spain's lead or follow Trump's lead?
View from the unity, Spain must raise the defense budget, I think, because Spain's military is not only for Spain. Spain's military is a part of the military of NATO. So that's why if the Russia's invasion has happened far from Spain, still the Spain need to contribute. That is the NATO, I think. So that's why if Spain, only country, do not want to raise the defense budget, this is not good attitude as a group member. So that's why anyway Spain need to raise the defense budget, I think, because the other country, other 31 country already agreed to increase their defense budget. And increasing defense budget is the power of Europe. This is not bad for all of the European countries, including Spain. So that's why Spain must find the budget. That is a matter. But anyway, they should raise the defense budget if other European countries raise the budget, I think.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satoru, for joining us and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on. The U.S. President Donald Trump has said that the U.S. has struck another vessel off of the coast of Venezuela, killing 6 people.